Drill, baby, drill. Pipelines are back, baby. It is wild to see things shift so quickly. I've talked about it before, how technology is interesting. And technology has changed things so drastically. What do I mean by that? I mean that typically in the past, things would change ideologically in politics slowly over time. But in the past 15 years, we've seen things change so much and go to different ends of the spectrum so often, it's hard to keep up with. It's hard to process how you feel about stuff. It's hard to really follow at times because it's so dang crazy. And the topic of conversation in light of these Trump tariff threats has been, we need to start building pipelines from coast to coast to coast, baby. And we need to start yesterday. Get this done now. And it was very fascinating seeing Angus Reid do a poll on this, seeing that there is strong support across the whole country to have pipelines going from coast to coast. The lowest results was from Quebec. And do you know how much they favor it by? 74% of their population agree with building more pipelines. 74. And if you take an average across the country, 79% of Canadians agree with building more pipelines in light of these Trump tariff threats. Holy smokes. All it takes is a little bit of economic warfare, and all of a sudden, people are like, yeah, that green economy, screw that. Build the pipelines, baby drill, let's go. It is wild to see how this all can transpire. And it is fascinating because that has been the hiccup. It's always typically been the hiccup. It's been BC and Quebec on both sides of the country causing issues to get pipelines out. But BC, 76% want and agree to have pipelines through their province. The Atlantic provinces agree 79%. Ontario is 81%, and Sask is at 86%, and of course, Alberta is at 89%. We are starting to see a shift in sentiment, a shift in culture in our country. And then an additional story from the Financial Post is that Quebec is open to LNG and oil projects after these Trump threats. Quebec has long resisted proposals to build new oil and gas pipelines through its territory. United States President Donald Trump's threats against Canada might change that. Quebec Environment Minister Benoit Charest said the provincial government is open to reconsidering two major energy infrastructure projects that it previously rejected. TC Energy Corp's Energy East Pipeline, which would have carried Western Canadian crude to refineries in Eastern Canada, was mothballed in 2017 over regulatory hurdles and intense political opposition in Quebec. A separate proposal known as GNL Quebec to build a liquefied natural gas pipeline and export terminal in the Saguenay region was rejected by both federal and provincial authorities on environmental grounds. The article said it there. We've seen it intense in both BC and on Quebec specifically, where this rejection of pipelines really comes up a lot. And even after these economic threats, they're saying, yeah, we need to reconsider this. Build some pipelines through our province. We need to get things going coast to coast and get to other markets. And it has been fascinating to watch the sentiment shift so drastically. When things start becoming very real, when your way of life is threatened, all of a sudden, things that make money and have proven to work are now being touted as the way we should go. The whole green economy idea is all of a sudden like, we need more LNG. We need more oil. We need to get things moving here. And don't get it twisted. We want to do so responsibly. We want to burn cleanly, but we clearly need these resources. So let's get on it now. That is where things are at now here in the country of Canada, which has been fascinating because we've been sold the green dream for the past 10 years. If this is where the trend is going, where people really want to see pipelines built, the Liberals have shown they are very much against it. Even though the ministers are trying to change guard and they've literally been openly lying, multiple ministers have been openly lying to Vashti on her show about how they feel about pipelines. Mark Carney has made no inclination that he's interested in going down that path. In the same breath yesterday, they're going to keep fighting the woke crusade. The same thing's going to happen as he keeps pushing this green energy nonsense because it's being exposed for what it is. It's a money laundering scheme and using the reasoning of green energy as the vehicle to be able to siphon money to his buddies outside of this country. That's really what it is. That's what's happening. And this will be exposed the more he talks. Just be patient. So it's great to see that the sentiment's changing. It's shifting, especially in places like Quebec, because that has been such a bottleneck. We need them to get on board so we can get things through their province. Because right now, what we're seeing is Liberals are starting to close that gap. This latest Ipsos poll, Liberals are closing the gap. Last week, they were down 26%. Now they're only down 13. So if you were honest in your critique and honest about how things are operating, you can look at this poll and be like, okay, this is for real right now. But as I said, just be patient. Statistically, a party that doesn't have a leader will traditionally do very well in the polls. Then the party will find their leader, and then the crap is going to start hitting the fan. And things will start coming out, especially as he continues to talk, as I said. And I believe we'll start seeing the reaction to how Canada feels about Carney's takes on the green economy and completely kiboshing our natural resources. Especially when truths like this start coming out, when Brookfield, that he used to be a chair of, but likely has a lot of stake in the company still, is investing and buying pipelines in other parts of the world, but he's kiboshing the projects in Canada. When this stuff starts coming to light, especially how people are now feeling about these Trump tariffs, you'll start seeing that reflected in the polls as well. I'm not one to get bent out of shape about polls, but I am one to at least take them for what they are. Snapshots in time. They're not the be-all, end-all, but they are something that helps inform and understand where things are shifting to. So it's something you should take seriously and adapt and understand that that's how people are feeling. And how can you start having conversations with people who are supporting a Carney-led Liberal Party? And this is the frustrating thing. We're seeing the sentiment grow across the country in no matter what province, the lowest being 74% agreeing to more pipelines. It's our political officials that keep getting in the way. Here's a leader of the bloc, Blanchet, says he strongly opposes any pipeline from Western Canada through Quebec to the Atlantic.
Fiercely opposed to any type of transport on Quebec territory of hydrocarbons from Western Canada to any market whatsoever. It does not serve Quebec. It does not serve the environment. It does not serve the planet. See, it's a mirage that we are always being told. The LNG zombie that was never really alive, that we reanimate as a kind of slogan. The pro-hydrocarbon speech that even Mr. Carney is starting to hold as if there were a future in Western Canadian hydrocarbons. The sacrifice of interests in green energies that make Quebec rich and that are a contribution to environmental issues, which are suddenly being pushed aside from the public debate to say, we are in crisis. What a great opportunity to bypass Quebec considerations and ecological considerations to unroll a pipe to the Atlantic.
It's awfully frustrating, isn't it? Even their own people are saying, yeah, I think we want to start this pipeline conversation. Guys like Blanchet coming out saying, no, we don't want this. This should never happen. We will never allow this. It's not helpful for the environment, and it doesn't serve Quebec's interests. It doesn't serve Quebec's interests. Well, first off, I don't even know how you're a federal party if you're only serving one province, but that's a separate conversation. But number two, doesn't serve your interests. Well, currently it's serving over $13 billion worth of your interests. Do we want to cut those off? Then all of a sudden, does it become your interest? This is why I think the conversation needs a shift. And I know many of you feel very similarly. There is no way on God's green earth, these political officials continue to deny what the people want is more pipelines. Even if Quebec didn't want it, the rest of Canada needs it. And if you're going to be a part of Canada, there's part of you that doesn't want to be. But if you're going to be a part of Canada, then you need to deal with it and get on board because you'll still benefit from the revenue from a pipeline going through. Again, not saying it shouldn't be done cleanly, but it needs to happen. We need to do this. So this is the issue. The problem is Quebec holds such a big stick in the political game. Politicians will always be afraid to go up against Quebec. As we see here with Jagmeet Singh. Again, this, like the Blanchet, is translated.
We have been very strong and very clear on that. When it comes to projects in Quebec, we should not be moving forward with projects that Quebec doesn't agree with. And that's clear in the LNG project, so we're against that project. But in general, we need to see projects where we're working together with the provinces and with the Indigenous communities and ensure that everyone agrees on the project going forward. That's our value as New Democrats.
As I said, these politicians keep getting in the way. If Quebec doesn't want it, then we shouldn't be doing it. What? Okay, fair enough. The people want it. It's the stupid politicians that keep getting in the way saying, no, we don't want this. The people want it. And this is the issue I have, is again, these politicians, as I said, Quebec carries a very big stick politically. If you take off Quebec, you could lose either your majority could turn into a minority government, or you could lose government altogether if you don't get Quebec on board. So you'll never, ever hear any rhetoric, and I will be shocked if I do, from any of our politicians, no matter what the political stripes are, saying they will cut off equalization payments from Quebec if they don't get on board with pipelines. You'll never hear that from them because they need them in the vote. They need them in a national election. However, I will be, if a conservative government were to get into power, I will be putting pressure on a Poilievre-led government to get real tough on Quebec and tell them either you get on board or we're cutting off your equalization payments. And we'll see how quick things change. I remember me and Reg talking last week about how much of a crazy move it was for Trump to withhold federal aid from California unless they instituted voter ID laws. I'm like, I don't even think I could do that. That's pretty savage. But this would be that moment for Canada. You get no equalization unless you allow a pipeline to go through. There's only two things you can do, Quebec. Absolutely nothing and like it. That's the stance that our Canadian politicians need to start taking with Quebec. And I shouldn't even say Quebec. I love Quebecers. I love people from Quebec. I love my French Canadians. They're awesome. It's their politicians that are absolute morons. Because clearly the people are also saying, yeah, bring on the pipelines. Help us out. We need to help Canada out. We need to avoid this Trump nonsense and avoid being under the foot and the boot of the United States of America. Let's start developing our own stuff, refining it, and also getting it to other markets. Please. That would help all of us out so much more. And so it's on the Quebecers to also start putting pressure on their political leaders. Be like, nah, we want this. For goodness sakes. We read it earlier. The environment minister, Charest, said the provincial government is open to reconsidering these two major energy projects. And again, it's up to the province, not up to the bloc. It's up to the province. So if you're in Quebec and you want to avoid any nonsense from Trump, get on the horn, impact your politics, talk to your premier, talk to your MLAs or the MPPs or whatever the equivalent is in Quebec, and get loud and let's make this happen. As I start off the show saying that we are starting to see such a shift in change in attitude, in ideals from the Canadian people, so much so. It made me look up an Abacus data poll from 2017, and this was Canadians' attitudes towards more pipelines being built. And here, we didn't see much of a large or really a huge contingent of people having negative views of building more pipelines, but we definitely saw the positive attitude towards it drop more into apathy rather than positivity. 2014 was 58%, then it dropped to 50% in 2015, and then it dropped to 44% in 2017. I haven't been able to find a poll or a study similar to this since then, at least in the time that I had. If anyone can find one, please link it to me. I'd love to see it. But I can only imagine that sentiment probably dropped even more. And I would say even the negative number probably increased a little bit over the past several years. Even if we take the 44% at face value, to see that 44% now change to a 79%, things change quick when your way of life is threatened. It is fascinating. So we'll be keeping an eye on how this conversation goes and if Quebec is able to put pressure on their leaders and we can get everyone to the table and start getting pipelines built after we get these stinking Trudeau liberals, soon to be Carney liberals, out of power. Have yourselves a good one. I'm out.